Hey everyone. As I am sure is true for all of you, our current state of affairs has really forced me to look at things in a very new way. I'm a writer by nature, and so I set my thoughts to paper first. But I thought I'd also share them in this medium for those that prefer video. If you'd rather read, I'll share the link in the post as well so that you can click through to the article. There are some very important things that we can learn from the response to COVID-19, especially here in Vermont. And many of them have to do with our self-reliance. As we hear about hospitals being tight on supplies, many are asking, why didn't the government replenish national stockpiles? I wonder, why didn't Vermont have its own, capable of equipping our own staff, our own EMS, our own police, with the equipment they need for at least a year of disaster? I wonder, why didn't each hospital have their own reserve? When I hear about larger businesses cutting employees and laying people off after just a few weeks of severe downturn, I wonder, why weren't they prepared for 1 year of downturn? I wonder these things because we're less than 100 years from the Great Depression. We're less than 100 years from a time when there were no vaccines and no antibiotics. We're less than 100 years from a time when people had to put up food and plan ahead to store and save. I wonder these things because it's been just over 10 years since we watched American businesses crumble after the housing bubble burst, since we saw true lasting unemployment surge, and saw what being unprepared for a market crash could turn into. And yet businesses didn't plan or save for the next downturn. They didn't plan or save for a bad year. They didn't think ahead to the inevitable and work to protect their employees and their own businesses. And neither did our state. I think about the thrift that Vermont was once known for and wonder what happened to that forethought. Why are we as a state not prepared for disasters? In just the past 20 years, we've lived through 9/11. We saw what happened after Katrina and closer to home, Irene. We saw H1N1 and watched as national medical stockpiles were reduced to almost nothing, and as 2 administrations failed to replenish them. We as a state saw the effects of mass layoffs, reduced tourism, and years of economic struggles following a severe market crash. 20 years have been filled with crisis that should have had us planning and thinking and saving. As a country and as a state, instead our taxes went up. Nothing was put aside for disaster. We looked more to the federal government and to outside suppliers and outside supply chains. And as a state, we did little to nothing to prepare for what we all should have seen coming. Instead, Vermont is now facing a $4.5 billion liability to the Government Employee Retirement Fund. That's a debt that was growing every single year. How could we have let this happen? Why are we so unprepared? But COVID-19 is teaching us something else, something we seem to have forgotten about Vermont, and that it is our communities that save us. It is our local movers and shakers that are pulling together phone trees and shopping buddies and neighbor delivery services to take care of the vulnerable in their own communities. It is our school boards and supervisory unions that are figuring out a whole lot of new things to keep children educated and fed. It is our small stores that are the ones that can keep the shelves stocked because they rely on smaller supply chains. It is our local distillers that can keep supplying us with disinfectant. It is our community crafters that can supply basic PPE materials for daily use, so those more precious masks are being saved for higher risk, more infectious cases. It is our local farmers and our local food producers, the local restaurants that can keep us sustained. We as Vermonters need to really look at why we have constantly looked toward more government intervention and more government solution. Why haven't we instead said our communities can, will, and should be the front line? They just need more government support for those activities instead of more barriers. If lawmakers spend as much time figuring out how to support community needs from the ground up instead of looking for top-down measures that are one-size-fits-all, if they spent more time planning for disasters that are inevitable, even if only once in a generation, if they spent as much time educating voters and town governments on the importance of saving, preparing, planning, where would we be as a state right now? I dare say we'd be in a better place. George Washington once said, "We should not look back unless it's to derive useful lessons from past errors, and for the purpose of profiting by dearly bought experience." We as a country, a state, and even as individual communities have not used the past as a teacher. We've allowed the affluence of the last 60 years to change us as a people, to make us consumers, not producers, to make us reactionary and not proactive. I say this may be our last chance to turn that around, our last wake-up call. We can do better, and we have to. Vermont is small enough and resourceful enough, and hopefully brave enough to make those changes, especially as we head into the next election cycle. So those are a few of my thoughts. And as we head into the next few weeks and the coming months, I'm sure a lot of this will take on new shape and new dimension. So if you're interested in what I have to say or want to see more of these videos, follow my page, and thank you for watching.